they deserve. So our heart and soul are volunteers who go to court.
Ready. So we'll begin. Well, welcome back. We are out of recess, and before we left for recess, I said that we were going to start with Legislative Day 13, but on our agenda, we had already figured that we were going to do Legislative Day 14 continuation nearer the end of the meeting, and it's listed after the public hearings and the vote on the assistant chiefs and 2 interviews. So with that, we're going to begin right now with our public hearings. This is a public hearing. The first public hearing is a public hearing on supplemental appropriation to the FY20 capital budget and amendment to the FY19 through 24 capital improvements program for the Department of Transportation in the amount of $2,100,000 for bridge renovations. Action is scheduled for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 16th. This concludes this public hearing. The next public hearing, agenda item number 8, is a public hearing on expedited bill 17-20, carry-out bag tax suspension. This bill would suspend the imposition of the carry-out bag tax until a certain date and generally amend county law concerning the carry-out bag tax. The council may also consider amendments to clarify a retail establishment's authority concerning reusable bags and generally amend county law concerning reusable bags. Action is scheduled for Thursday, tentatively, for Thursday, April 16th. If you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council website has a subscribe to function. Go to the council website and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. It's my understanding we have had testimony submitted for this, and that will be online. The next item, and that concludes this public hearing. The next item, agenda item number 9, this is a public hearing on supplemental appropriation to the FY20 operating budget for Montgomery County Public Schools in the amount of $3,424,109 for the Title I Part A grant. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. This hearing is now closed. Councilmember Rice, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to move that we approve the supplemental appropriation for $3,424,109 for the Title I Part A grant.
Is there a second?
Second, Navarro.
Councilmember Navarro would. So it has been moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. All those in favor, please do so by raising your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? This carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item, item number 10, is a public hearing on supplemental appropriation to the FY20 capital budget and amendment to the FY19 through 24 capital improvements program for the Department of Health and Human Services in the amount of $1,140,000 for the Men's Emergency Homeless Shelter Addition. Action is scheduled for Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. Persons wishing to submit additional material to the council's consideration should do so before the close of business on April 16th. This public hearing is now closed. We're now going to go to item 4 on page 4 of our agenda, which is an action item for the confirmation of county executive appointments as assistant chiefs, Montgomery County Police Department. I'm going to need somebody from staff. Do I need to vote on this individually, each person individually, or can we do it as all 4 together?
This is Bob Drummer. You can do them all together if you want. Okay. I mean, if somebody can ask to separate it out, if they would like, if they wanted to vote against somebody, but you can do it all together.
Okay. I am looking for a motion. Who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
Moved as a block to appoint the Assistant Police
As a
Chief.
block, right.
As a
And
block.
Councilmember Albornoz, you were the first to make the motion. Who was the second?
Friedson.
Friedson, very good. It's been moved by Councilmember Albornoz, seconded by Councilmember Friedson, that we approve for Assistant Chiefs Dinesh Patel, Ronald Smith, Willie Parker Lone, and Thomas Didone. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Same sign. Congratulations, Chiefs, Assistant Chiefs. You are no longer just acting. You notice the hands up there. Very cute. Yeah. All right. I'm impressed. All right. So the next item that we have is an interview, and this is for County Executive's appointment as Director, Department of Permitting Services. It's Mitra Hidyoum, and we're also being joined by Fariba Kasari, and are we on? Is she on?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I know I saw you earlier. I just don't know where you
Yes.
are at this moment, but
Yeah, I'm
anyhow,
here.
welcome and thank
Yes,
you for
thank
being
you.
with us. We have some formal questions to ask, and then my colleagues will, if they have other questions, they will ask them as well. But thank you for being here. The first question that we have is, tell us about your professional background and how it relates to the specific responsibilities of the Department of Permitting Services.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here today to be interviewed for this important position, especially under these circumstances. I would like to spend a few minutes to share with you a little bit about who I am and my values, and then I will continue with my knowledge and experience. I was born in a Persian Jewish low middle income family in Tehran, Iran. Alongside my siblings, I realized that the only way to better life was through education. However, given that there was a limited number of colleges available, only a small percentage of the students would get accepted. This small pool of students came from those who could obtain the highest grades in a one-day national contest after graduating from high school. I knew that if I was not successful in the contest, it would be the end of my dream for a better life. As a child, I developed a love for mathematics, and my dream was to become a civil engineer. For a Jewish girl in Iran who was frequently faced with gender and religious discriminations, a dream like that was far-fetched. Nevertheless, I studied hard during the high school and passed the one-day contest with a high score and was the only female accepted into the Tehran University Civil Engineering College, which happened to be the top university in Iran. The Iranian Revolution started in my final year of college, and this caused all the colleges to be closed. With the help of my family, I planned a 45-day visit to the United States to get away from the unrest. While in US, there was a change in the regime and the current government came in charge. All Jews became fearful of their lives, and my family warned me not to return home. I remained in the United States with no financial help, no visa, no degree, and no dream. An American family in Brooklyn, New York, helped me by providing me a room in their home and guided me to apply for a work visa. I started working as a laborer to support myself. At this point, I was short only by 3 courses to obtain my engineering degree. I applied for several colleges and was accepted in University of Maryland to finish my Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering in a year. After this, I received a scholarship toward my master's degree in structural engineering that I completed in 1982. While in college, I applied for asylum and received my permanent U.S. residency so I could seek employment. And this was followed by naturalized U.S. citizenship a few years later that I'm proud of. I share my story to express my gratitude for what this country offers refugees and immigrants who come here for a better life. My 2 children and I, alongside with my sister and brother, who joined me shortly after, have been able to live American dream. I strongly believe in the principle and values of racial equity and social justice, and I personally live by it every day. After I graduated from University of Maryland in 1982, I worked first as a computer programmer at the NASA Space Guidance Center. I realized soon I would like to continue to fulfill my engineering dream, and I began working with the State Highway Administration as a bridge engineer for 5 years until 1987, designing bridges in various locations in Maryland. Later, I moved on a new job as the only structural engineer for the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. From 1987 to 2001, I developed and coordinated major capital improvement programs for various transportation projects. I established a bridge program, including biannual inspections, bridge replacements, and bridge renovations. As a result, county bridges were much more safer. I also managed the only in-house design team, and during this time, I automated the hand-drawn plans with the computer-aided design and drafting tool. During this time, my design team and I coordinated closely all of our project reviews and permit acquisitions with the Department of Permitting Services. As a client to DPS, my team and I experienced many of the same issues outlined in the For Business report. In 2001, I decided to expand my horizon within the government and started working with the Office of Management and Budget as a senior budget analyst for Montgomery County. I did that to learn more about the government organization and operation. At OMB, I learned how to analyze and recommend operating and capital budgets to the county executive and the county council. I learned about the different fund sources and fiscal policies for executive departments such as DEP, DPS, DOT, fire and rescue, libraries, and recreations. I learned about the operation and the CIP budget for Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, which paved my way to a great career with Montgomery Parks. In 2004, I was hired by Montgomery Parks to run a newly construction section for Park CIP project where I was tasked with managing park construction permits, the work of contractors, construction managers, and inspectors, which is similar to the nature of the work done in DPS. For my 5 years in this capacity, I streamlined, developed, and implemented construction management practices and procedures, revised and renewed construction specifications, and prepared several policy and guidelines. These are same skill and experiences that I will bring with me to this department. During this time, I worked closely with DPS and the plan reviewer and inspectors for the acquisition of permits. And this gave me additional insight as a client for what worked and what needed to be improved. During the next five years with the Parks Department, I was promoted to the Park Development Chief. During this time, I oversaw $200 million CIP for the Parks Department. I increased the implementation rate for the capital improvement programs from 65% to almost 100%. I brought in the state-of-the-art technology, incorporating e-plans and digital signatures to streamline project management and making my vision of paperless environment a reality. This was an important step, enabling staff to telework from home or anywhere, anytime. These types of initiatives and technical innovations are what I would bring to DPS. I also implemented inclusion through the American Disability Act guidelines into the capital improvement program with the vision of making all our parks accessible. Inclusion, ethical and moral obligations are a priority for me, and those are going to be the priority for the department that I will be leading. My final position with the Parks Department before I retired last year was when I was the Deputy Director of Administration for 5 years. During this time, I led over 170 staff across 5 administrative divisions within Montgomery Parks. This included park planning and stewardship, park development, management services, information technology and innovation, customer service, and public affairs. Some highlight during this time was revamping the department's enterprise asset management, coordination of ERP systems, and being a member of the IT Council. I also spearheaded the planning and design coordination of the Wheaton headquarters. My solid educational background and the 37 years of very diverse but relevant past job experiences make me uniquely qualified an ideal candidate to lead Montgomery County's well-respected and already high-performing Department of Permitting Services. When this opportunity came across, I felt this department is where I can use my experience and knowledge to make a difference. My focus, among other things, will be streamlining the permitting process, enhancing customer service, and transparency. I aim to make Montgomery County a place where small and large businesses can come to invest, to stay, and to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you see as the most important issues you will be addressing in your new position?
First, I would need to observe and understand the aspects of our customer needs and their issues, and before I'll be able to address them. However, I believe the answer to your question can be summarized in 2 words: customer service, which can include the following. As we talk about it, streamlining the permitting process to make it easier and faster to obtain permits. The recent Turn the Curve Performance Agreement, prepared by DPS based on the feedback received from the 4 business, has acknowledged 3 areas for improvements: electronic intake screening, plan review, and inspections. This agreement also includes a blueprint for shorter and more customer-friendly process. My plan is that to use these recommendations as a framework and add any other observations that I would receive during the first few months that I'm on the job to start with this process. I also like to partner with other review agencies that are involved in issuance of the DPS permits. Our customers need permits in addition to other permits in addition to the DPS permit. Those other permits are park and planning permit, state or federal permit. It could be other utilities such as PEPCO and WSC. Usually DPS permit is the last one. So I will work with our customers that how to obtain those permits or navigate the process before they get to DPS. The other thing that I would like to work on is the transparencies. Provide a customer-friendly and easy website for our customer to navigate. I know that DPS has already updated their website, but that could still get even better than what we have done. and we're going to use the technology to make it easier. I like to upgrade the system for DPS to be more customer friendly. For example, make it easier for our customers to log in and to see the status of their permits and see the comments. I like to assign custodians to applicants when it makes sense. Right now, DPS does that, but they do it for more complicated projects and some special projects. I could see that if I can expand it and provide custodians maybe to minority or very small businesses that are not familiar with our process. The customer inquiries, my understanding is that right now all the customer inquiries go through the 311. From my personal experience and also from the time that I had the customer service at Parks Department, I think that we could make some improvement on those. And we have heard about permit fees. This is something that the For Business has indicated that the permit fees are too high. So there is that perception there. One could be that when applicants pay for their permit fees, they pay for all other permits, such as impact fees. So maybe there are some areas for education in here that we explain that what are the different fees that they pay. And also I look into to see that if there are some other areas that we could improve, like maybe repeated reviews or things like that, that to reduce the permit fees if possible. That's something that I have to focus in. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
How about now?
Okay, I hear you now.
Thank you.
Okay.
How do you think the permit and licensing issue process could be changed to make the county more competitive as compared to other jurisdictions?
Well, I already talked about the permitting process in response to the previous questions. I do think that technology can also help to streamline the business process. For example, I will investigate into the feasibility of virtual inspections or the use of third-party inspections as another tool, as long as the safety is not compromised. Regarding the licensing, currently DPS requiring the trades like electrical and mechanical to obtain both local license in addition to state license. I don't know why we need both. Again, this is something that I will look into it. Again, public safety would be number one. So these are, and also I'm going to look to some other processes to see that if there are places that we could make the business process easier.
Thank you. The county recently passed a law on racial equity and social justice. What measures would you take to advance racial equity and social justice in the department and countywide?
Sure. As I mentioned it at the very beginning of my interview, I strongly believe in racial equity and social justice. I live by it. I'm totally committed in implementing processes and practices to advance county executive and county council in regard to their goals for both of these two areas. For the department, I will work closely with Ms. Stephanie Ward, Director of Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, to ensure that all DPS key staff, including myself, are adequately trained and have a clear understanding of the issues. In regard to countywide, again, in close coordination with Ms. Ward, I will identify those policies and programs that are obstacles for small businesses, especially the ones that are owned by people of color. I will work with those owners and potential business owners to identify, modify, or create policies that are easier and more effective for all of us.
Thank you. Please explain your understanding of your role as it relates to the council.
Well, my number one goal is to always be transparent and responsive to your inquiries. My plan is to have an open, honest, and regular communication with you and your staff. Hopefully, as soon as I come on board online, I will contact your offices to see that what kind of communication you like to see from us. And also, I would like to understand any specific or immediate issues that you have, and also what else you like to see for the department. So I would seek to get those information from you. My goal is that to create an ongoing and open forum to reach out to our stakeholders, such as builders, developers, different industries, coalition, HOA, professional contractors, etc., and get their feedback on how to improve the process and help them to obtain their permits. That's why I want to be ongoing, because different permits come at different times. I hope this ongoing forum will be one of the means by which our stakeholders can raise their issues for resolution before they come to you. Of course, they can always come to you, but I like to have opportunity to see if I can resolve it. So we will see. That's something that I will work on. And I usually answer my emails. I'm famous for that. I'm 24/7. You can contact me anytime. So please, and I respond to you as soon as that I can.
Thank you. Do you have any conflicts of interest of which the council should be aware?
I don't have any conflict of interest. However, for your information, I have been a party in the opposition of the size to a development that would remove more than 5 acres of forest that is about 1,000 trees, somewhere 100 years old, next to the homes in Cloverly, Silver Spring, including right next to the house my late husband and I owned for 20 years. Although I have moved from that home 2 years ago, I continue to appear as an engineer expert for the opposition group regarding the size of the development. This matter is now in front of planning board. After I was nominated for this position in January, I officially withdrew my involvement with this development. If the planning board refer this matter to DPS for their expert opinion, I have already indicated that the matter will be handled solely by DPS Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Hadi Mansour.
Thank you very much. This concludes our formal questions. And Councilmember Reamer, please.
Thank you. Mitra, thank you for being with us today. It's good to see you. I've had a chance to work with you over many years in your work at the Parks Department, and I always appreciated your work in the capital budget program. We did a lot together, and it was nice to get a chance to hear a bit of your personal story today. My question is really about the mandate that you have been given from the county executive. I would like to know more about what direction the county executive has provided to you for your work at the Department of Permitting Services. And I will follow up with another question.
Sure. Basically, it's exactly what I discussed when the question was asked from me. He wanted to streamline the permitting process. He basically was talking about the issues that were in for business report. Permits take too long, discrepancies about the reviewer and inspector comments, incomplete inspections, He also brought that this issue of the in specific places that the permit fees are too high, that he wanted me to look into the transparencies that people would be able to log in to see their permit status and to be able to see everybody's comments. It was a lot of complaint about that. And also he was concerned that we as Montgomery County stay very competitive with other similar counties, that businesses can come and stay. He gave me all of those charges, and those are what my focus is. And I agree that we have done a lot. DPS has come a long way. I have been, since January, I have been in contact with Hadi Mansouri. He's the current acting director. He has provided me all the information. A lot of improvement and changes has already happened based on the comments that we had heard at those public shred. So I have a marching order on day one start. That what I need to do.
Okay. The county executive had said that he felt that the permitting process was one of the critical breakdowns for the county, and that at least initially he said he wanted to benchmark us against other jurisdictions and ensure that we were the most competitive of all jurisdictions, and wherever there was a problem area, work to resolve that. I have yet to see any recommendations come over for any changes. So I'm concerned that the county executive is not following through on his agenda here. And I would like to know that the DPS director incoming would have some very concrete ideas in mind beyond, the generalities of we need to improve the process, which I agree, but some very concrete reforms to go in there and make those changes. Otherwise, I'm concerned it could just be kind of status quo. Can you comment on some of the specific items that the county executive and executive branch wants to make?
Well, that's why I'm here. Specifically, he wanted me to look at the fees for the condominiums, that I will look at it. There are some changes. He wanted to make sure that we stay competitive and make the length of the permits to be shorter. And that's what I will be trying to do, and hopefully I can do. I have a record of experience of doing this kind of stuff. And, he specifically explained that, people complain that they cannot reach to DPS staff. They want to get inspections to be done faster. And, very the same kind of issue that we have talked about it. What I can do is that as soon as I come on board, I could definitely come up with specific, as soon as I can, with some guidelines. And I would like to sit down specifically and see that if there are anything else that you like to see us to do. And I like to roll my sleeves up and start doing it as soon as I can. I do have a big list of stuff that is very detailed, the stuff that I had already prepared and written down. Some of them are simple. It may be low-hanging fruit that we could do, and some it may take long. But I have I have been home, frankly, these few months since January that I was waiting to be confirmed. So I have created a list, and I have worked with Hadi, and I can share all of those information with you if you like when I come on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I wanted to continue kind of the same line of questioning, and I appreciate it. And congratulations for joining us virtually and for your appointment by the county executive. The county executive has staked much of his economic development strategy on streamlining permitting. That's been the core part of what he has consistently shared. I echo Councilmember Reamer's point that we've yet to really see any comprehensive proposal based on the efforts and based on the significant comments and public expectations that have been created. You mentioned a long list of items. I'm not sure that that long list has ever been shared with us in any type of formal way, and so it'd be great if that could be shared with us. We'd appreciate it. But I'd also just like to hear, you talked a little bit about some of the issues of streamlining. A lot of them were a series of small issues, and I do believe that in government, getting the small things right can make a big difference, and so I appreciate that. But are there any big overarching issues, any major changes that are expected that you've specifically talked to the county executive about that you can share with us that you expect to implement, or that either is the result of the report or is the result of conversations that you've had or your experience with the department?
The biggest thing is that the three areas of improvement that, in my opinion, would be the best, there is a blueprint that is already prepared in the turn the curve. So there are three areas that I talked about it when we had the answering the questions. One is the electronic plan intake, the screening. A lot of times this screening plan is sent back to the applicant because it's incomplete, okay? Each time that this comes and goes, it takes time. That's number one. And there are series of steps that has been indicated that it gives you a blueprint or a road path that how to improve this process. That I have read it and I agreed it. I have not shared that formally with anybody. This was just a homework that I have done for myself, that as soon as I start getting on board, I'll start doing that. But as soon as it's finalized, I can share it with you guys. The second one is the plan review, okay? When the plan are, especially if it has multidisciplinary areas that it has to be reviewed. When you have a plan that comes in, it needs review for architecture, mechanical, electrical, fire and rescue, and structural engineering. So it has 4, 5, 6 different disciplines that have to review. And all of these may take time. And some of the comments from one discipline may impact comments from the other discipline. And that may be another one that takes time. So again, there is a road path that how we could make this process easier, that it takes less time, especially with the e-plans right now that DPS has. And I'm very familiar with it because we had the same e-plan. I brought the same thing to the Parks Department. When one discipline makes a comment for one aspect of the project, everybody else can see it. Even the applicant, and I'm planning to add the owner also, because the applicant may be the engineer that is working for the owner, okay? They can see right there, as soon as the comments is made, they can log in and see the comments. So this is something that they make sure that it happens and everybody can see it. So again, if one comment conflicts with another comment, then the reviewers can find out right away and work it. So this is something that can help. The other one is inspections, okay? Again, you hear sometimes that inspections are incomplete and, they reject it. They should probably go finish the whole inspections, even though that they're not going to get the permit. And sometimes you hear that the inspectors makes comment that it's not in agreement with what the plan reviewer have. So it has to get the plan reviewer on board, and just these two talking to each other may take time until they agree, and then that may delay the permit again a few days. So all of those things are things that I will be working on it, and there is a path forward that very detailed has provided all the work that needs to be done, that I like to go there and see that how I can get them done during as soon as I come on board. And also, in addition to those, I would like to add a few other ideas, like have more virtual inspection as long as it doesn't compromise safety. Especially now that we are all online, but the construction work still continues. So if someone wants to do inspection, and we could do it virtually, or we could ask them to do a third party inspections. So again, for that, it's a lot of different ideas that how we could improve these processes. So the roadmap is out there, and I know that I have already talked to the current acting director. They are gradually paving their way, and they are moving on that. A lot has been done, and a lot is still in the works, and some other ones that I would like to see some changes are there. So what I can do, I know that you are concerned, I can constantly stay in touch with you. As soon as I have all of these officially in my hand, and I have formalized that exactly what would be my plan, I need to talk to all the key staff of BPS. They have been there for years. As much as I'm familiar with the project, with the department, I rely on them. I have heard they have fantastic people there, really good employees and senior managers. I would like to hear them out. I like to know that what they have done and what their input is. Although that it is online, I'm going to meet with all of them online. I'm going to hear them, and I have that road path. I'm going to get them all together and formulate a process, and I can bring it to you.
Thank you. Final question, two parts. One is, how long do you expect for these changes that there's a roadmap for, as you said, to be implemented, both for the council to be aware that it's been implemented, and more importantly for applicants to understand that it's been changed because the process has been improved? And number two, what metric will you use to determine individual metric, most important one, or series of metrics will you use to determine whether or not the department has improved, and by how much?
Yes. Again, this, turn the curve of the road path has multiple years. Some of the things are low-hanging fruit that we could do fast, and I know that some of them has already been done, okay? And there are some that it's multi-year. It has to do with, some upgrading of systems. You need, that takes time, and some of it needs funding that to be done. So we could bring you a schedule, and it already has for fiscal year 20, fiscal year 21, 22. But when I go there, I will look at it to see that how, because some of the things I like to make it a little bit, bring it ahead, but I have to see if funding or other staff are available, because I need, IT staff for technology. So yes, we can provide you those with the time frame and show it to you that how it works. There are performance measures that would measure every single thing, and we have all of those performance measures already identified. I have read it and I have reviewed it, and it makes sense. But remember, I haven't been there, so I have to go there, and I haven't talked to any of our senior staff and DPS. It's very important that I get feedback of staff. I cannot really do anything until the first 3-4 months after I have been there, I have observed, I have talked and listened. It's very important. That's an extremely important step that I see what is going on. And then I can come and meet with you guys and show everything. I just need a few months that I can observe, I listen, I learn. I think I have a very short learning curve because I'm familiar with the process, but I need to hear the staff and observe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. Hey, Mitra, it's good to see
Hi.
you.
Good to
For
see you.
full disclosure to my colleagues, so most county recreation facilities are on park and planning property. And so there were 11 different capital projects that I worked on while I was at recreation, and I worked with Mitra on 7 of them. So I'm very familiar with her work and can confirm that she is extraordinarily responsive when you send emails, no matter at what hour of the night. But Mitra, this is a very different job that you're going to be taking on. You're going to be managing a very large department with some incredible staff. And so could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned customer service, and you mentioned needing to get in over the next 3 months to get to know staff and better absorb and process what's going on. But could you talk a little bit more specifically, in addition to listening to staff and assessing and evaluating, what strategies you're going to utilize to motivate staff, to bring staff together? And then I have a second part of that question. But if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure. It's going to be a little bit different because, hopefully when you, or if you confirm me, I would probably going to start online. Okay. So that would be a very interesting way to start. What I like to do is that I like to start a meeting with all the key staff. Frankly, I like to meet with everyone. It takes me a while to do that because DPS has about 200 staff, and I want to hear everybody. I want to hear every single employee to see that, number one, to know them, number two, to hear their concerns, and number three, to hear what they can do or what I can do for them. Because I really believe that staff are the assets for the department. As I explained, when I was at the deputy director, I had close to more than 170 staff. So organizational, especially government organization, is something that I feel very comfortable. Building motivated staff, it brings that I personally have a lot of respect for every individual. I believe that everyone would do their plan is to do the best. Okay, I trust everyone that when they are in their work or when they are doing their work, they want to do the best. And frankly, everybody value what they do. Most of the people that I have worked with, I can call them that value goes to be fanatic about what they do. They are proud and they protect what they have been given to them as a custodian of public funds. So I have a lot of respect for them. My job would be to provide them with what they need and give them leadership to continue doing what they're doing, and provide them vision and goal to get to where we want them to be. I believe that I have to lead by example, and you know me, or everybody that has known me, I am a very motivated and energetic and up-to-date person. I bring the energy and I expect the same thing. I want the best and ask the best. I give them everything they need, but at the same time, I make them accountable for what they do. It's very important that I be very clear to what I'm asking them to do. So English may be my second language, but I have never had issues with my staff not understanding me. I make it very clear that what I'm looking and what I want. I'm a result-oriented person. I don't micromanage what they do, but I tell them what I want and when I want. You know that as we discussed it, the implementation rate for CIP, I changed it from 65% to almost 100%. The only way that is possible is that you create and motivate the staff. And this is something that I'm good at. And you could talk to everybody else. I love my staff. I have always loved the staff. We have always had a good relationship. And definitely this is something that I would like to bring with me to DPS. I know a lot of people at DPS. I know Hardy for more than 20, 25 years. I know him since he was a consultant when I was working at DOT. So we have a very good relationship. We have kept our relationship since then. That's why I felt very comfortable to call him and find out about all the things that I discussed with you today. Because I have met with him and I have talked to him. I know a lot of other staff at DPS. So it's like going back home to me. I don't see it as a stranger. And believe me, I have all the intention to make the difference and to do what the county executive has asked me to do and to do what you want to see happen.
Thank you, Mitra. I just have one last question. So one of the few silver linings in this, crisis that we're going through right now is government is having to think more creatively than it ever has before to be able to communicate to our constituents, to be able to provide strong customer service. And there are likely lessons learned in a number of different areas that we may be able to apply as the dust settles moving forward, so that, for example, people could potentially present plans online and in a format like this, as opposed to having to travel to Rockville, take time off of work. And so there are probably other tools. Have you already started thinking about the world that is going to be our reality as we slowly get back to what will never be normal again?
Maybe normal. I call it a new normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call it. Of course I have. I was here earlier and you heard me, I was talking to my grandchildren. I have my children and my grandchildren here with me since we have all been stuck in the house for 4 weeks. So we haven't done anything. So my son is here from New York, and my son-in-law works for contractor to federal government. Everybody is doing telework, okay? And I have taken telework, yoga and dances and exercise, and actually I have started teaching dance online. So all our life has changed. We have started doing different things different way, and I always supported telework as a regular part of work, not as an emergency. And I talked to my son and I talked to my son-in-law, and they all pleasantly surprised that, not my son, but my son-in-law, that they are as effective and motivated working online than being at work. Of course, I don't say that take away all the people together. I'm a really touchy person. I like to see people and I like to touch them. I like to be in communities. I just like to feel people next to me. But I do believe that, yes, you are 100% correct. It's going to be a new world when we go. I brought in e-plan for project management that was totally different. That means that everything is going to be done online. And, there is something written on my forehead if you talk to people in the commission called digital signature, e-plan. I worked on it for about more than 10 years. By the time I retired, it happened. They gave it to me as a retirement gift. So I am 100% for it. Those are the things that allows you to start a different way of what you are doing. I think that the hotel, you still need the brick building, but maybe less of it with the hotel space and everything that people are there. But things would be changed. So what is our friend? What we have to pay attention to? Technology, technology, technology. You need to give the good tools and the right tools to your staff that they could do what we need to them. So technology is coming, taking a lot of times place of brick and mortar. But yes, I have been thinking about it, and I actually have talked with Hadi about it, but I'm not the director yet.
Yeah. No,
so
thank you,
I
Mitra.
cannot do much.
Got it. No, appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Mitra. Congratulations. A few questions for you. I appreciate everything you said about the need to develop strong relationships with the existing senior staff at DPS, the incumbent staff, and to listen to them about how they're doing things. I also think DPS is full of people who have been there a long time. They're talented. They're very knowledgeable. They're usually very responsive to me. They're not always so responsive to my constituents. But I believe it's a department that needs significant culture change. And the county executive has said that. I think if that's going to happen, it would need to be communicated from him and through you if you're confirmed. To me, based on just the feedback I get after a decade in elected office, you know, I get more complaints about DPS than really any other department in Montgomery County. And that's not to say it isn't full of hardworking individuals that are trying to do the right thing, but I think the culture that they're getting from the top it doesn't reflect the values I think that this council and the county execs say they want to have. So do you agree that we need culture change at DPS, or is that something you take issue with?
I haven't met everybody, but I'm a very honest people.
I know.
Please give me a chance, 3 to 6 months that I be there and observe. I cannot answer this question by not being there, but I can put your heart at ease. I'm not afraid of making change. Good. I live by change. I have made a lot of changes. You could talk to Mike Riley. You could see that lots of changes I have done, and I know what you mean by culture change and everything else. Please give me a chance. Let me go there. I promise you, if I see that there are need for changes, we're going to do that. That's what my job is. I'm honest. I go there and I change it, but I don't know if it is there or not. I can't answer that. Sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate your candor and your outlook on it. I wouldn't think it would necessarily take 3 months to 6 months. And I know it's probably more complicated than I can see from the outside, and that's why what you said earlier about staying in close touch with us, about your plans for change, and your plans to manage that change are going to be critical. Because I bet I speak for all my colleagues that we would like frequent updates from you rather than just to confirm you and then cross our fingers. Specifically, you mentioned that you are aware of this problem that happened, I probably hear about weekly, where a plan reviewer meets with a homeowner or a business owner or a contractor and gives one set of instructions, and that homeowner or business owner spends $50,000 executing against the requirements that the plan reviewer laid out, often without even laying it out in writing, just verbally. And then the inspector comes and says, oh, I don't know why they told you that. We stopped doing things that way 2 years ago. Here's the way you really have to do it. And then the business owner or the homeowner has to go off in a completely different direction and meet a new set of requirements. And people find that maddening. It's very expensive. It's anti-business. And it really erodes confidence in our management and in government generally, I think. So I heard you say that you're aware that that's a problem. How are you going to manage against that problem to change it?
Well, the best thing it is that what I would like to do is that and to put the inspectors and plan reviewers together before they issue the permit or before they do the comments. So that means that a multidisciplinary review of everyone. This is very similar to the work that we used to do. We had designers, we had construction managers, and we had inspectors. Another issue could be that is unforeseen site conditions, okay? So you have a set of plans and everybody is happy. We have got the inspector to agree with that. So it's very important when the plan reviewer finish the review to get the agreement of the inspectors on what they have, okay? So they have agreed on that. But then when they go to start construction, they're going to see unforeseen site conditions that changes everything that they have agreed. A lot of times the issue is risen because of that. And the inspector may make some, recommendations that when it comes to the office, because you have 4 or 5 different plan reviewers. Remember, we have architectural, mechanical, electrical, and structural. All of these people have to review it, and it may not have been reviewed by all of those. So what my goal is that when the inspector or these changes happens, that everybody get together, and by having a system like this that we have, we could get everyone together, even though it's of a short time. And with e-plan, the beauty of e-plan is that if one person makes a comment, readily is available for as soon as they write the comment and push enter, everybody can see that comment. So even though if we are not together, we could all see the comments together. So if we make sure that the system is upgraded, is easily accessible, everybody knows how to work with it, we should be able to get everybody's comments together before it goes to applicant, that they don't hear different comments from different people. So my goal is that I do all of those collaborations and we go out with one voice to our applicants and tell them that what is the next step that they have to do.
And then the goalpost can't move after that, right?
That's my goal. Yes, you're correct. You're correct. That's the goal.
I want to ask you about business. Thank you. That's I like that answer. I want to ask you about business attraction and retention in other jurisdictions, cities and counties. The business owner wants to locate their business there. If a business owner who's already there wants to expand, very often they contact the Department of Economic Development or their equivalent in that jurisdiction. That the lead person brings in a team from permitting services and other relevant departments. They all get together. They all make a plan for how they make the business owner feel welcome. They want to create jobs. Everybody gets on the same page. And then permitting services in that jurisdiction works with that business owner to make sure they get all their permits along a timeline. Everybody leaves the room with the same expectations and the same understanding of the requirements and the same timeline. But that doesn't happen in Montgomery County. And dozens of business owners have talked to me about how much harder it is here, usually because permitting services is sort of off doing their own thing, not consistent with our rhetoric that we want businesses to come here and we want our current businesses to expand here. So what do you want to do about that?
I definitely want to be part of it. If DPS is not sitting at the table with those other groups that you talked about, I have already been contacted with a few industry. As soon as they saw my name, they wanted to talk to me. And I said, sure, but let me get on board first. So that is what I like to do. I like to be at the table. with whoever that is involved with those businesses to come. And remember, I also am proposing something different here also, and that is the ongoing open forum that we talked about. So if at somewhere or somehow they forget to invite me, when I say me, I mean DPS. Of course, I take the initiatives, but I'm not yet there. But if they forget to invite me, or if we were not there at the table, I want to create another forum that they can come, that I can help them. I heard and I know that there is some room for improvement. Transparencies and reaching out to our customers is my number one priority. I want to be at the table. I want to hear their issues, and I want to see how I can resolve those issues. I have done that. I had done it before. I know how I can do it in future also. I just need the time, and it may be a little, but I don't know, with online. I'm hoping that eventually we'll be able to actually meet with people and everything else, but that's my goal.
Okay, thank you. And I want to combine my next, I know you're not there, so you can't really comment on why this happens as much as I want to communicate that this is one other thing that is a frequent source of complaints to us that I think you should know how to fix. Residential permits in public rights of way, whether it's on a county street and a DOT project or a utility project or on a state highway. DPS processes the approval for all those the permits to allow the construction to go forward, but then doesn't communicate with the residents. So then residents have nowhere to go except they call us and they say, why is this happening, or why is this still happening, or why is this happening at 3 a.m, or why is it happening at this decibel level, whatever, outside my /home/business/apartment building, and why did DPS allow this, sometimes in apparent violation of county law, and nothing was communicated to the residents. And they don't know often what the utility is. Washington Gas, Pepco, WSSC, they just know there's a bulldozer and floodlights and an excavator in front of their apartment building at 2 a.m. So that's an easy thing for DPS to fix.
Definitely, that's a low-hanging fruit. If it's not happening, because
Mitra, not a week goes by when I don't have to deal with complaints like that, and it's ridiculous. So
I agree with you.
Right?
No, that's a very important part. I don't know. I will check into it, because we as public, we are very cognizant to contact property owners. It's a rule. So maybe someone has been missed or something. I don't know about that, but that's very important, and it's just a standard that you contact the property owners, and depending on the type of the work, you may even go beyond the property owners to let them know.
Including not just the property owners, but tenants who are not owners, but they're the ones suffering at 3 a.m. when the excavator is outside their apartment.
Okay. So I see that why it may not have been heard, because sometimes it's hard to get the name of tenants because the information is sent to property owners, and the property owners may not have told the tenants. So that's a very good point. It's something that we could see why it's not there. I would like, when I'm confirmed, I would like to come, and I'm trying to take notes right now, but I can listen it again. But if something else you remember, just let me know.
I'd love to work with you on it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mitra. It's really good to see you. I don't have much to say. I think a lot has been already discussed and brought up. But I will say that it is clear, that we've all been very eager to see exactly what will this streamlining mean, because it is an important issue. It's one that we've been talking about for a very long time. So I think that's going to be super important. I really appreciated your reference to the racial equity and social justice, because we all understand that there are many, many, many people who need to also be able to navigate this whole entire process. And that is yet another barrier. So if it's difficult for folks that can, access things on a regular basis, imagine how it is for people who may be doing this for the first time. And so I really appreciate you mentioning that issue. And just by, my interactions with you in the past, the Parks Department, et cetera, I have no doubt that you're going to be able to hit the ground running and make up for all this lost time that we all feel very anxious about, because obviously we want to make sure that everything gets done very quickly and that all these issues are resolved. So I look forward to your confirmation, and thank you so much for all your service thus far to the county. And I look forward to seeing what more you're going to do in this other position. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, and I echo the comments of Councilmember Navarro. A lot has already been said. Let me just say this, Mitra. Our DPS is oftentimes a big problem solver for us in the community, and you've heard that through a number of the council members who've given you specific examples of all the things from homeowners to businesses to our individual departments. And it's always been one of the things that my office has been able to rely on in terms of that partnership and the quick responsiveness, that level of communication that needs to be there to walk people through our processes, understanding that they're very challenged, sometimes convoluted. I do agree we need to try and streamline some of that. That will help with some of that. But the reality is every day we pass more laws. And as we pass those laws, it makes it much harder for people to actually navigate through those laws. So we're actually part of the reason why folks have the challenges they do. But that being said, I think that, again, having that partnership with you and the department will help to make some of those things happen. And so I really look forward to that. I know your positive energy and positive spirit and positive light that comes to this, and I know that will help you to make sure that you're motivating your department to be the same way, to be assistive, to be ready to roll up their sleeves and work together with the community to make these kinds of things happen. Because we do want to see progress in our community, whether it's people who are putting, decks on the back of their homes or people that are building buildings. I mean, it runs the gamut, and it certainly is something. All of it's important to the well-being of our community, to our continuing advancement as a community. And so from that perspective, I know that your positive energy is going to help us along those lines. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mitra, I've been listening intently to all of my colleagues. Very good questions. You've clearly heard a theme that has emerged, or quite frankly, it hasn't emerged. It's been here. It's been pent up, and we're looking to you to help drive it forward. And the only thing I will add, aside from my impressions of being very impressed with your presentation and your background and your commitment not only to Montgomery County government, but to public service and overall from some of the other jobs that you have had in the public sector, is this crisis that we are currently living in, with businesses closing by the day. When time comes to reopen and rebuild our local economy, they're going to be coming to you for help to reopen their businesses. That's why this position is so important. That's why the need to modernize and find efficiencies is so important, so that when small business owners are ready to open up their doors again, when they're allowed to open up their doors again, we'll be ready for them. And when all of our constituents come to us asking to get their doors open as quickly as possible, we'll be coming to you. And so that is the task that is ahead of us. And I look forward to working with you to help restart our economy here in Montgomery County when the time comes.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mitra. Don't worry. Hopefully I'm last, and I'll be the least in time. I want to thank you for your presentation. I want to echo my colleagues who have said I was extremely impressed with your story. I thank you for starting with that. I think where we come from and the motivation for what we're doing and our appreciation for this community is requisite number one for anyone that seeks to serve it. And I know you've served it for a long time. So I would also say, I was going to make a similar point to Councilmember Glass, that the time to, part of this time when we come out of this crisis, and I think this is personally and professionally, I'm certainly using it as this, we need to come out different and better than when we went in. And in order to do that, we're going to have to change things. And we're going to have to recognize and do some self-reflection. So when two things that you said during this last hour stuck out to me the most, that you've been using this time that you've been at home, waiting to think about what you can do, putting a plan together, think about things that you might implement, and two, that you're not afraid to make changes. And I think you're hearing a tone here that's going to be both of those characteristics, that preparation and the ability to want to make changes and work with us are going to be very important. So I look forward to working with you and excited about your vision for the department and excited that you understand the important role it plays in making sure that we come out of this crisis better than we went in. And I appreciate everything you've had to say today and look forward to working with you.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mitra. This concludes our interview. Your the vote on your appointment is tentatively scheduled for next Tuesday on the 21st. So thank you very much for being with us. Take care.
Thank you.
The next item that we have is a Board of Appeals interview, and that's Mr. Richard Melnick. Is Mr. Melnick on the line? Do we know if Mr. Melnick is here? Is someone checking if Mr. Melnick is here?
I can confirm Mr. Melnick is not on the line currently. We will work to get him online. Okay, well then, why don't we have other work to do. We can come back to Mr. Melnick. When he gets here, we will stop the other work and come back to Mr. Melnick. What we're going to do now is go to the legislative session day 13, which it said it was continued, but it really wasn't that continued because we hadn't started it. But so it's cause of bills for final reading. Sure that I'm starting in the right spot here.
Yeah.
Is Mr.
You've
Melnick?
got some bills. This is Bob Drummer. You have at least one bill for introduction.
Right.
That was scheduled for the morning.
Yeah.
It was an addendum.
Well, we have more than that, Bob. We have.
Yeah, more than that. You have, I see 1820, 1920, 2020.
Okay, I have 1920. I'm looking for. Did you say 1820?
Yeah, the rent stabilization during the emergency.
Yeah. Okay.
1820. And also in the beginning, there's an introduction of a 2320 management and disposal of goods emergency procedures.
Right. I have it. Okay. Thank you. So the first bill that we're going to be dealing with is 1820. It's an introduction for landlord-tenant relations, rent stabilization during emergencies. Lead sponsor is Councilmember Giwando. Co-sponsors are Council President Katz and Councilmember Rice. It was tentatively scheduled for a public hearing to be on the 21st, April 21st at 1:30. And then the action was also scheduled for the same day, though I'm saying that should change for the action to be on April the 23rd, 2020. And I know that Councilmember Giwando wanted to speak to this. Please.
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate And if you hear a chainsaw outside my window, someone's taking a tree down. It's not me. So just FYI. I wanted to speak to, there it goes. I wanted to speak to this bill and appreciate the co-sponsors. I think Council Member Navarro is also a co-sponsor. I've worked with her on this bill on components. It is also going to be known as the COVID-19 Renter Relief Act. And the goal here is to prohibit rent increases on residential property. There was some back and forth. Obviously, we're in an emergency. I had considered adding commercial property to the bill, but to just keep it simple and to focus on the core of the issue that I've been presented with and that I've seen, we're going to focus on residential. And so this would prohibit the increase of residential rents during this crisis and for immediately after as people are recovering. The conversation we just had about how we're going to need to recover. 1 in 10 Americans out of work right now. A third of our residents are renters. Many less protections and money for people who are renting. There have been some protections for homeowners who have mortgages. We need federal action to help people who are just trying to pay their current rent, let alone any increase during this time as they're trying to deal. We also know our renting population tends to be our lower income population. Also, the folks who are most at risk being in close quarters, it's very difficult to social distance. So there's a lot of anxiety going on in our particularly our multifamily renting population. And many are struggling. Our office has received some, unfortunately, reports and communications from residents that they have seen increases in some cases, pretty large increases. I want to mention just a few because this has been a point of contention already. And we will be releasing this information later with permission from some of the residents. DHCA actually has been trying to negotiate with the gallery in Bethesda, where they've seen an increase of 35% with at least one resident. Quebec Terrace, where I grew up in Long Branch, we've seen just in March an increase of 9% and also additional late fees added to residents. At the Grand, maybe this is one of the worst ones that I was directly reached out to, the Grand in North Bethesda in the White Flint area. A resident wrote in about didn't know what they could do and asking for help about an increase of 35% from $1,600 to over $2,200 a month. And they didn't know how they were going to deal with that. There were several other incidences at the Grand itself. I've seen at least 3 others at the Grand, ranging from 14% to 60% increases. And these were decisions that had to be made in March about increases that were going to take place by July. ABC 7 reported last week about the Galaxy Apartments in Silver Spring and a resident who was facing an increase right now and didn't know how she was going to pay it. These are just some of the examples. DHCA, when I asked how many calls are they getting, they're saying they're hearing about this problem every day. That was the quote. The Renters Alliance also works with renters, has said they've heard of multiple issues and this is a problem. At the same time, I've also been in touch with some of our landlords and property managers, many of whom are doing the right thing and doing their best to work with their residents to ensure that they can get help, to work with them to modify payments, to halt rent increases. And I want to commend, many of them. I know Southern Management is doing this. I know I just spoke to Richard Cohen at Wilco Companies yesterday on the commercial side and the residential side. They're doing this, and there's others. AOBA has worked with their folks to make sure that they're doing this, and I think I commend that activity, and I think it's the right thing. The problem is that as I've cited, there's people who aren't doing it, and it's not just at one property or so. There's multiple, and this protection, this bill, would simply say that during this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, that there cannot be rent increases that would occur during the crisis or 30 days after. The bill would then sunset 120 days after the crisis in the state of emergency ends. And that's because landlords are currently required to give 90 days notice on rent increases. So that's incorporating that time period. I think if you asked anybody, is that the right thing to do, they would say it is. And we want to encourage everyone to halt these increases because people are having trouble paying their normal rent. As I said, 1 in 10 Americans out of work. Last two things I'll say is that DHCA, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, considers an increase of 10% to be excessive in constructive eviction, meaning that's unable to pay, and they try to negotiate. But currently, if a complaint is given in those grounds, all they can do is try to negotiate on behalf of the tenant. There's no requirement that the rent has to be reduced. So we need to, now more than ever, protect our vulnerable populations as we advocate at the federal and the state level for help for landlords and owners of buildings so that they can pay their bills and pay their employees, but for renters especially, who are very vulnerable right now, and many of whom need assistance. So I hope that my colleagues will support this bill. It's not a rent freeze. It's not rent control. It is a temporary measure to help people who are struggling right now during this crisis. So I thank you for the time, and we'll be talking more about it, I'm sure, over the next week.
Might I remind everybody, this is strictly for introduction. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. First I want to thank all of those property owners, property management companies, et cetera, that have voluntarily expressed and have communicated with their renters that they will not be raising rents during this unprecedented pandemic. And it's important that we recognize that, because I have also heard from renters who've said, hey, I received a notice from, a property management saying that they're not going to do this for the next 6 months. And so there is a lot of that going on. And I think that speaks volumes to our community here. The fact that people recognize that this is a pandemic that is affecting so many different layers of our daily life. Having said that, I am very cognizant of the fact that not everybody is acting in that mode of a good faith. And so, I also spoke to Nicola Whitman from Ayoba and very appreciative of how proactive they have been in terms of also sharing important information to renters that have to do with assistance and things like that. But it is important to note that not everybody's doing this. And so when I first looked at the bill, the one thing that stood out for me was that it seemed to be a bit broad. I know that the intent of the bill was for us to respond to this particular pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why I presented that amendment that I shared with everyone to narrow the scope of the bill specifically to this epidemic, to the emergency that was declared by the governor for a catastrophic health emergency on March 5th, and that it would end 121 days after that emergency is lifted. And so I appreciate the fact that both Councilmember Jawanda as well as the original co-sponsors agreed to include that to narrow the bill. We will have plenty of time to have conversation about, what comes next and how we should position ourselves. But I think it's important for us to be focused exactly on what it is that we're trying to achieve here. I also appreciate the fact that my suggestion to change the name to the COVID-19 Rent Relief Act has also been adopted. And I think this is also critical so that our constituents understand what it is that we're doing, and other jurisdictions, I think, have done as well. So the intent, I think, is a good one. I'm glad that the confusion regarding commercial was cleared because there was a bit of confusion going around. And so, yes, as it was stated, this is an introduction of this bill. It applies only to residential. It is tailored to this COVID-19 declaration of catastrophic health crises by the governor, and it will sunset 121 days afterwards. So appreciate the fact that everybody's working so hard. Councilmember Jawando, you've been working really hard on these issues, and maybe also let everybody know to have a little bit of patience, because this is unprecedented. And so what we're doing here is working through a very difficult time in trying to cover so many different areas. But the intent, I think it's a good intent. And again, I think, it's all about making sure that our renters know that we're definitely thinking about them as well as we're navigating this crisis. So thank you so much for accepting those amendments, and I hope again that we are able to adopt this and move on to other things as well.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to Councilmember Joando, Councilmember Navarro, and you, Council President, for your leadership in terms of this bill. Look, when I was first looking at this, I thought this was a no-brainer. And it was a no-brainer because we already knew in reality that many of our landlords had already been great role models and were saying that they weren't going to raise rents during this pandemic crisis and weren't going to do things that were going to negatively impact the very people who they want to keep their great relationships with. You know, this is something that we've grown to know and expect from a lot of our landlords that are out there, right? And the majority of them we know are doing great and working with their tenants. Unfortunately, though, the reality is there are a few outliers that are out there. And so that's what this is about. Now, so I want to make sure that my constituency of landlords know that this is no casting of dispersion of negativity against you. We appreciate you. You are our partner, and we understand that you're doing the right thing, even in the face of hard times, because you also own a business. You also have employees, and you're trying to make it work. And so we understand that. But we, unfortunately, have to legislate based on the fact that some people choose not to do the right things. And we've got to protect those folks. And so I just want to make it abundantly clear that our greater community, I've had great conversations with AOBA. I know that Councilmember Joando has as well, and a lot of different varied owners. I've had some owners who've reached out to my office, and I've told them the same thing. I see this as merely legislation that clarifies what many of our landlords are already doing in existing practice today, which is understanding that we are in a tough time, and in response to tough times, we have to do things that are outside of the box. And that's what this is. This is a temporary measure just to make sure that we're protecting some of our most vulnerable in an extremely challenging time. And so I just want to say thank you. I do believe that, again, we can get past, unfortunately, the general media likes to cast a conflict. There is no conflict here. The county council loves its landlords, and its landlords loves its tenants. And Montgomery County, we do things the right way. And unfortunately, there are always going to be bad actors in everything that happens in every aspect of life. And unfortunately, we're going to have to act just to make sure that some of those folks aren't able to do those kinds of things right now in this face of this global pandemic. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to all the co-sponsors.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to colleagues. I appreciate Councilmember Joando for the interest and focus on this issue. We all recognize we're in unprecedented times. We have vulnerable residents that face serious issues. I appreciate the rationale behind moving forward and the interest in making sure that we're focusing on that. I appreciate the fact that we've taken commercial properties out. I had some real concerns. I know other colleagues did as well, based on the fact that we aren't set up to regulate that, currently in the same way that our housing authority is set up to regulate housing, and that the crux of the issue that is being focused on here is the unprecedented public health emergency that we're in, the stay at home, and the point of that we want people to be able to stay in their home. And I get that, and I appreciate that as well. Appreciate Councilmember Navarro for tailoring it and narrowing the focus of this as I believe it was originally intended, but wasn't originally crafted. And so the letters now, I think, more reflect the spirit of the intent there. And so I really appreciate that as well. I just think it's important to recognize some of the comments that have been made, but the overwhelming majority of property owners are responsible. We are lucky in Montgomery County to have the overwhelming number of property owners who live in the region, who are part of multi-generational, often family-owned businesses that don't buy and sell to another company that has no connection, but build on property that has been owned for a long time and hold on to that property and have many generations that are part of that. And I think it's important that we note that. I think we recognize in every situation that there are bad actors that do bad things, and that's not just true of property owners, that's true of everybody, including in this particular scenario. There are also tenants that take advantage of a lack of eviction, and the fact that we have fortunately, and I think very effectively, before even the state stepped in, made sure that nobody would be evicted during a time of crisis like we're talking about here. But I think it's just very important that we note that. I think it's also important to recognize that we have to get through this public health emergency, that we are in a public health crisis right now. But before it and after it, we will return to the housing crisis that we have faced. And rent control as a general policy is not a successful solution to a housing crisis. And I think I just want to make sure that that is noted as part of this discussion, and why it is so important, as has been discussed, that this is narrowly tailored to the specific moment that we're in and the unprecedented circumstances that we currently face and that our residents currently face. I also wanted to note that when we were originally drafting our comprehensive council relief package, I put forward originally emergency rental assistance relief as part of the original package. That was something that I thought was very important to protect our vulnerable residents. The advice that we got at the time from those who work on these issues was that the real issue for those residents would come later, when we're going to face a real crisis on those issues. I continue to believe that we need to lead by the power of our example, not just the example of our power, using carrots and not just sticks. And so I continue to believe that we should be working together to ensure that we're providing the type of financial commitment to help people stay in their homes. I also believe that this council has continued to ask and will repeatedly push for the county executive to move forward with a list of tax abatements, fee, license, and other regulatory changes to make it easier for property owners to do the type of help that they are providing, many of them, for their tenants, to help those tenants. We have reports of retail collections at 21%, where almost nobody besides grocery stores and beer and wine stores and other similar stores that are doing well in this crisis, the rare few, are paying rent and everybody else can't. And landlords are having to take that, as part of their challenge, and we need to be stepping up to help them. So look forward to continuing the conversations that have already begun, working with several colleagues. Councilmember Glass and I have at least one amendment we'll be working on together. I've had conversations with several of you as well to put forward, potentially other amendments to make sure that we are using the scalpel that is required of this moment and not the hatchet, and making sure that we are focusing this particular policy proposal on the folks that it should be focused on, to help the folks that most need it. And so appreciate the collaboration and coordination of colleagues. Look forward to a serious discussion over the next week to figure out how we move forward. And just wanted to say again, as has been stated before, that for all of the businesses that are struggling, for all of the renters who are struggling, for all of the property owners who are struggling with them, we are trying to step up in every way that we can to help you and support you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in just for a second because I too am a co-sponsor. When I agreed to be a co-sponsor of this, the discussion was it was going to be residential. And that is the reason I am a co-sponsor. It never should have been commercial considered for this. And now commercial is out of this, and it should be. The commercial market is a very different market than the residential market, and it certainly has a very different meaning to the tenants themselves. So the fact that commercial is no longer in this legislation, which it wasn't in originally, now it is no longer, now it is back to where it was originally. I remain a co-sponsor. But I also want to, I've spoken to many people over the last several days, just like all of you have, who I truly respect and are good, honorable people, good, honorable business people, who really were very angry over the fact that they were being cast in a way that was not fair. And I think we need to very publicly say, and it's been said a couple times already, but I think we need to very publicly say that this is not about every landlord. In fact, this is about the very few landlords. This is about the exception rather than the rule by far. There are people who were, as I think was Councilmember Rice pointed out, this is a business as well. Like being a landlord is a business as well. And we need to keep in mind that our business people, to the greatest degree, are very, very fine and concerned people. And they've been concerned about their tenants way before this legislation was discussed. They were the ones who went to their tenants and said, if you are having a problem, let's work together. And of course, we also worked with the sheriff and the courts and other people so that there would not be any evictions. But we have done it so that people will not be on the street, not be displaced during this horrible crisis. And I think that all has to be mentioned. I had one very fine landlord mention that this really should be called, rather than a rent stabilization, it should have been called an anti-gouging bill, because that's what this is. This is telling somebody, look, I have you over that barrel, so therefore I'm going to raise your rent because I know you're not going to find another place. This is an anti-gouging bill, and that's what this is all about. And I also want to believe, and it's been mentioned, that I think we should put in there that this is something for existing tenants. That if someone wants to if they are renting a home now and an apartment now, that they should be, if it's a new lease and they're moving in, that this should not come under that. A landlord should not have to rent it to the same for the same amount that they are renting to someone that just left for no other reason than they left. So I think we need to look at those as well. But I think the bottom line on this is we need to thank our landlords. We need to thank our landlords for what they do, and we need to appreciate what they've done for the many, many, many tenants that they have. And with that, Councilor Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think a lot has been said, but I'm and I haven't had a chance to talk to the lead sponsor, Councilmember Jawando, about it. So I'm very focused on the business grants. But I'm grateful for the initiative. You all know I welcome anything that is aimed at giving some relief for our renters and as Councilmember said, protecting our vulnerable populations. I had the same reaction Councilmember Navarro had, I think, about it being broad at first, and the President said as well. I think we need to tailor it to focus on make it an anti-gouging bill. I agree it ought to be limited to existing tenants, and I think we ought to take a look at what the impact of on the county revenues are, because I know all of us are very aware of how deep this crisis is, and we don't want to enter into big, far-reaching legislation with unintended consequences. So anyway, eager to work with all of you and especially Councilmember Jawando on some amendments, and look forward to the discussion. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Lots to say here, although a lot has been said already. But one of the mottos of this whole crisis has been that we're all in it together. And I think this is a case where generally that's quite true. When our workers are laid off, they can't pay rent. The property owners and the tenants are sinking together.
Am I the only one not hearing Hans?
No, we lost him.
We're all off. Okay.
Yeah, we lost him.
Hans, are you back? All right. Well, we're going to Councilmember Glass, and then when Hans can come back, I'm going to text him. When Hans can come back, he will. Councilmember Glass.
Great. Thank you, Mr. President. Really good initial conversation here. I want to thank Councilmember Jawando for introducing this legislation, recognizing the complexity that our community faces here in Montgomery County and the DC region as we try to come to grips with protecting our most vulnerable, whomever they may be. And we we talk about the stay-at-home measure here that all of us are bound to, and here we are talking about the ability for people to stay in their homes. And so that's fundamentally what this conversation is about. And I know that the sponsor and sponsors of this piece, some of the policy has entered the public discussion ahead of more substantive policy conversation. And I can understand that because we all recognize that we are in uncharted territory with this crisis. But as Councilmember Friedson noted, he and I do have some amendments that we're working on to make this legislation more streamlined to the people that this problem is affecting. Councilmember Jawando referenced examples, real world examples that have been shared with him. And I appreciate that. I look forward to hearing more, quite frankly. And, I've been speaking with many of the stakeholders, as all of us have. And one of the things that has been heartening to me is that AOBA, the Association of these apartment and office buildings, they have proactively and voluntarily suspended rent increases for all of their properties. And to put some perspective on that, their properties make up about 70% of the rental units in Montgomery County. So before any legislative or regulatory action was even put into place or even introduced, the association of these buildings basically put that into effect for 70%, which is great. And I really appreciate their forward thinking and their recognition of the problem that we're facing, this crisis. And so one last thing I will say is that a month ago or so, when we started realizing the depth of this crisis, and we as a council started putting together various pieces of proposals to provide relief. Councilmember Friedson referenced the component of renters that was left out because staff and others had said it would muddle the waters and it wasn't the appropriate time. I've taken a month to work with our staff and to work with others to come up with a proposal that I'll be sharing with all of you very soon. It needed a little time to digest because it needed to be right. And I took the time to make sure that it is right, to make sure that people feel protected in their current homes. Because lest we want anybody to be experiencing homelessness right now. We don't want anybody forced out of their homes or put into further financial duress. And ultimately, that is what we are doing. We're protecting our small businesses with a $20 million fund. We're protecting our most vulnerable with a $6 million grant in the Department of Health and Human Services. And now we've begun a conversation about how we support renters, which is a very valid conversation. And I just want to make sure that it's done right. And its aim is at the individuals who are actually experiencing what I think is accurately been described as gouging. And so again, I appreciate the thoughtful comments that have started this conversation. I look forward to the continued spirit of this to make sure that everybody feels protected in the homes they currently live in while being respectful of and mindful of property owners who have already enacted such a policy for 70% of Montgomery County renters. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go back to Councilmember Raymer.
All right. Sorry about that. My phone died. I'm on my laptop. So what I was saying was that one of the things I'm hearing from property owners is that they are expecting that they'll actually have to decrease rent in the coming months, year maybe, because they recognize that their tenants will not be able to pay rent because of 14% unemployment that we could be headed towards, and so on. So It is a situation where I think everybody is in it together, and we do need to find solutions that can help address the problem. I think in this case there is a problem. My office was contacted by one of our residents who was facing a request for a 10% increase with their lease renewal. I don't know the backstory as to whether that landlord was trying to gouge this tenant or whether they, what it was. But we reached out to DHCA, and DHCA, Rosie, did an amazing job. She got right on with the property owner, and in response to that outreach, the property owner agreed to take that rental renewal rate down to the voluntary guideline, or perhaps to zero. But the underlying problem here is that if you're a tenant, this is a really awful time to have to move. And so an unscrupulous landlord could take advantage of that situation. And so that kind of underlying problem is one that unfortunately puts people into a tough spot. And there are a few examples. It is not I don't think it's a broad problem. I don't think this is something that's widespread, but I'm not quite sure how you could solve it effectively on a case-by-case basis either. So with that said, I'm glad that the amendment to add commercial was removed. I thought that was very problematic. I think that, we know that there is a problem with commercial landlords seeking, they want their rent. I think that's the problem. It's not that they're trying to increase rent. I think most commercial landlords understand that in this retail environment, their retail tenants are precious. They may not be around for all that long. And so I'm skeptical, except for in very few cases, that there's a market issue there. But I know that many landlords are seeking to get paid for rent, and for businesses, really deferring rent is the only way that they're going to survive. But, I think that removing commercial was a good move. And I do think we need to focus, as others have said, on renewal. That this should only be a lease that's getting renewed. It should only apply there. Last thing I want to say, this is not actually an anti-gouging proposal. This is a rent freeze. Anti-gouging is what this is trying to prevent. But typically anti-gouging provisions allow for landlords to raise the rent, but they don't allow it to be raised to an extreme level. I don't know that you would say 0 versus 1%. 1% would be extreme, or the voluntary guidelines would be extreme. But I'm comfortable with 0 given the short duration of this proposal. I think that makes sense. I think a rent freeze during this health crisis is perfectly fine. But an anti-gouging measure, California enacted a statewide anti-gouging measure, and it was a 10% rent increase allowance because they're trying to prevent landlords from demanding 15 or 20% rent increases. So anti-gouging is a different policy than a rent freeze, which is what this is. But we do need to be very careful here because, as others have said, our housing market depends upon private investment, and a rent control ordinance really discourages private investment. It's okay for some people who live here today, but you can look at Tacoma Park. Not a single new unit of housing has been built in Tacoma Park, and in fact, the amount of rental housing has declined in Tacoma Park because landlords remove their rental housing from the stock and they turn it into, for sale property. They turn it into single family rather than duplex or triplex. So I think we need to be extremely careful about enacting ordinances that would deter private investment in housing, because housing construction can lead us out of this recession. That is one of the economic lessons I think that economists are pointing to, is that the housing market itself was fairly strong coming in, and it could be one that will recover quickly, and it could help pull this country and the community back into, economic growth. So we want to really be sure that we support, we have a strong pro-construction, mindset, and we support housing construction here. In the coming months, we're going to have to take up a lot of different measures around housing itself. But I think a rent freeze in the context of this epidemic, when tenants are so disadvantaged in the marketplace, makes good sense. Thanks.
Thank you. And I did want to point out, and I don't know California's law, but an anti-gouging law was during a time of emergency when a retailer or some other person believes that they have someone over a barrel and that therefore they can charge a premium price because of it. And that's basically what we're dealing with. And I understand there's a difference to some degree, but this is gouging if someone is going to the degree to the percentages that Councilmember Jawanda was talking about in the beginning. Councilmember Jawanda, you're next.
Thank you. This is going to go on record as the longest introduction in the history of
I
Bill.
sure hope so, because I don't want it any longer. Yeah.
I appreciate all my colleagues, and like I said, I look forward to working with each of you on potential amendments and questions and all that, as I already have even prior to introduction. So I look forward to continuing to do that. I just wanted to say a couple things. We have to be able to, and I try this very hard, to hold both the great Montgomery County that we are and the many great actors and the fact that things aren't great for everybody at the same time and have that discussion. And I don't think that's inconsistent with what we're doing here. Carrots and sticks, I think, that I like to say, and I think Councilman Friedson mentioned as well. We need both. And this is narrowly tailored. I did want to mention for the millions watching at home, and we might actually have millions for this watching at home, but DHCA is encouraging people to talk, as is AOBA, to talk to their landlords. If you're having a problem, if you're watching this, talk to your landlords. Tenants can apply for help through our housing stabilization program. I agree we need to add more money to that. I think that is the right carrot on that side too, as we do work to do other things to protect people on the other side like this bill. And we want to make sure that people are not adversely affected. I agree with the renewal point. That was the intent of the bill, as I've mentioned to some of you. I think we can tighten that up and clarify that this should happen at renewal. All the cases I mentioned are at renewal points, which is what is happening in some cases. And I just want to say thank you. And the final thing, Washington, D.C., both their rent control, they have a mixed city, they have rent controlled and market rate buildings. Both have been frozen right now, so we don't have to look far. Neighbor have done that. In Los Angeles, for a sector of their housing market, has done that. So has Glendale, California. There's others. So we won't be alone. I think this is a good step forward. I look forward to working with everybody over the next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let that be introduced. I guess that introduction is there. We're going to turn to Mr. Melnick, and I see his picture is on the screen. Mr. Melnick, are you there? Richard, are you there?
There we go. Yes, I am.
Okay, how are you?
Mr. President. How are you, Mr. Council President?
Good to see you, Richard.
Good to see you.
We have a series of questions. Obviously, this is for the Board of Appeals interview. And we have a few formal questions, and then my colleagues might have a few questions after that as well. The first question is, why do you want to become a member of the Board of Appeals?
First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Council President, Vice President Hucker, and distinguished members of the County Council for this opportunity to interview for the membership on the Board of Appeals. Your question of why do I want to become a member of the Board of Appeals, I can summarize it, I think, in four different characteristics. Number one, I've always been determined to enforce and follow in my career to abide by the rule of law. And I believe that this position is one in which I'd be in a position to be able to do that. I've, throughout my career, been very, very much involved with public service, and I look forward to the opportunity to continue to do that in this position. I've been, number three, very much involved with leadership in both my community as well as in my profession. And number four, I've been very much involved with dispute resolution. And as part of that, understand the importance of communication in all types of dispute resolution, whether it's negotiation, whether it's litigation, whether it's mediation, collaborative law. And the Board of Appeals is a body that's very important because it impacts people literally where they live. And it's very important to folks from a rule of law standpoint because the Board of Appeals must ensure due process, must ensure a fair and neutral forum in which for people to be able to bring their disputes or grievances, and it must demonstrate expertise in their area in the field in which the different issues are coming up. And based on my experiences throughout my career, I am in a position where I can achieve that and provide a great service to the members of our community in providing those things. For 30 years, I was an associate county attorney with the Office of the County Attorney in Montgomery County. I've handled hundreds of cases involving litigation, mediation, negotiation. I was the lead attorney for the county's contract procurement and commercial law unit, where I negotiated and dealt with disputes in hundreds of matters, contract matters. I was the president. I was elected the president of the Montgomery County Bar Association, in which I served. I've been twice voted in as onto the Board of Governors for the Maryland State Bar Association, and in those roles, was involved with the dialogue on freedom, and I initiated a program called Creating and Improve Tomorrow, in which I brought together attorneys, judges, legislators to go into classrooms in high schools in the county and educate them on legal issues that are relevant to young people in our society. It began with the Trayvon Martin trial and the different rules of self-defense in Maryland and Florida. It evolved into the present day, where they're continuing to have sessions in high schools related to the opioid epidemic. And dealing with different issues, including immunity for folks who might be in the presence of somebody who's having an opioid overdose, and allowing them to be able to seek assistance for that individual without themselves being subject to prosecution. So these are some of the different leadership roles that I've undertaken. I've also been very active in my community, and I was the president of the Longmead Crossing Homeowners Association years ago. I'm presently involved with helping with the Greater Olney Civic Association, and I was also the city attorney for the city of Annapolis, where I was involved with helping lead I did lead the Office of Law in the city of Annapolis, dealt with many environmental and zoning issues, including representing the Board of Appeals, the Department of Planning and Zoning, the Planning Board in the city. So I've become, and that was a good fulcrum upon which to really get involved with some zoning issues. I also have been involved with the Attorney Grievance Commission in bringing actions as senior bar counsel on ethics and professional responsibility issues that different attorneys might have been subject to and were accused of having violated. I've been involved with teaching courses at Montgomery College, the University of Maryland School of Law, the University of Baltimore School of Law, and the University of Maryland in mediation, negotiation, and peace building in a post-conflict society. So I've been very active in trying to reach out and lend my expertise in different areas, both professionally and in the community, and feel that this would be a wonderful opportunity to continue to branch out and be a part of helping our quasi-judicial system in dealing with different land use issues, including variances, conditional uses, and what used to be known as special exceptions, dealing with administrative appeals from decisions of different agencies. And in fact, when I was with the county attorney's office, I had the opportunity to be in a position where I brought cases before or defended actions against the county before the Board of Appeals. So I'm very familiar with the processes and procedures and the different laws that pertain to the Board of Appeals. And I also had an opportunity along the way to fill in and represent the Board of Appeals on occasion as their counsel in different matters. I was also counsel to other administrative agencies, such as the Commission and Office on Common Ownership Communities, which has similar types of processes and procedures for dealing with issues in a quasi-judicial manner. So for these reasons, I'd be very interested and excited to be in a position to become a member of the Montgomery County Board of Appeals.
Thank you, Richard. On the next question, I don't know how you can answer it anymore, but the next question is, what in your background prepares you to serve on this board? I think you touched on those a couple times. Yeah.
I think I did. So I appreciate you recognizing the fact that I touched on some of the things. And just to shed some further light on it, the different. While I was a county attorney, I regularly provided negotiation courses and also courses on the law to different county employees and officials, and I think that that in combination with some of the things that I've already discussed would put me in a very advantageous position to be able to proceed to hear different disputes that might be before the board. Some of the types of cases that I heard before the Board of Appeals dealt with building code issues, electrical code issues, permit grants and denials that different neighbors might have had against one another in order to assert their interests so that they could live in what they view to be a peaceful way and peaceful enjoyment of their property. I also dealt with some issues at the air park to ensure that things met electrical code and building code out there because of the significance and dangers that were posed out there. I was involved with the Silo Inn. If you remember, the Silo Inn used to exist on Georgia Avenue up near Olney. There was a lot of blight going on at the point that Silo Inn closed. I was involved with dealing with issues related to its demolition and the creation of new development in that area, and I dealt with issues really that in many instances became neighbor against neighbor kinds of disputes. One issue in particular that I remember is that one neighbor wanted to cover a substantial portion of their land with a driveway for commercial trucks that are on their property, and their neighbor felt that impacted their use of their property and the character of the neighborhood. So the Board of Appeals again addresses issues that are close to home for people. That dealing with issues that might affect individuals, might affect businesses, and allow for people who are operating each of those things to be able to coexist in a peaceful manner, not violate the county laws, and be able to be in a position where they can achieve their objectives while not overrunning the objectives and rights of their neighbors.
There again, you seem to be one step ahead of my questions, because the next question is, tell us about a time where you have helped to achieve consensus among groups or individuals with differing points of view.
Well, I'll start off by answering that I'm a trained certified mediator, and so I'm very interested in the idea of bringing people together, facilitating a negotiation between those folks to be able to resolve differences that they might have and come to common ground in developing their own resolutions. Now, having said that, the Board of Appeals, being a quasi-judicial agency, allows for a cost-effective manner for folks to be able to work through issues without having to go to the expense and time and energy of going to court in many instances, unless it's of course appealed, and then it would be generally an appeal from an administrative agency. So in general, I've got a wide breadth of experiences in mediating cases and being trained and having done that. I was the chair of the Maryland Judiciary's Mediator Excellence Council, so I'm very much in tune to the idea of working through issues. And in accordance with that, when I was the city attorney for the city of Annapolis, when I first arrived there was an ongoing dispute that related to a particular part of Annapolis, and the developer was in the process of applying to try to create a development which was controversial, and it both from a bulk standards standpoint, including height and square footage that was allocable to residential versus commercial uses. There have been several cases brought in circuit court in the matter, and I prompted and participated in a mediation that brought together the concerned citizens from that area in which the development was taking place, as well as the developer, and brought in the city as well, to the extent that the Department of Planning and Zoning had an interest in making sure that whatever development occurred there was done in accordance with the law. And we worked through a mediation and a resolution in which the cases in circuit court were dropped. There was still one remaining issue. I worked to draft a legal opinion as the city attorney. There was some concern by one of the city council members regarding the decision of the Department of Planning and Zoning director. I collaborated with him and worked with him while I was supporting the decision of the Department of Planning and Zoning and giving deference to that decision because the decision was based on a reasonable interpretation of the zoning law. I also worked with the city council member to ensure that it was not it was worded in a way that it was not directed in a manner that it made it look like the city council's member's position was wrong, but instead that the decision of the Department of Planning and Zoning director is given deference if it's reasonable and not arbitrary and capricious. And just to give, and it worked out that I was able to publish the opinion. The city council member was able to save face with his constituents, and you know, there was the ability to proceed with the normal processes within the city for the application for development. And in that particular case, it dealt with an interpretation between two conflicting provisions of the zoning ordinance. One provision established height standards that could only be changed by going to the planning board if the height was above 45 feet. There was another provision in a different code that referenced the height provision that indicated that there was an MPDU incentive bonus of 20% if the developer met the standards for the number of MPD units, which it did. The director of planning and zoning made a determination that the 20% would be added to the 45 feet so that the development could be at 9 feet more in height. And that became the controversial question that I drafted the opinion on, and I supported the decision of the director of the Department of Planning and Zoning, but also made sure that the city council member and the concerned citizens understood the reason for that decision, and allowed everybody to save face and be able to proceed on with the issues of the development. So that's one example of where I was involved with trying to collaborate and working with people to achieve the common good in working through and reconciling a dispute.
Okay. Please explain your understanding of the role of the Board of Appeals and how it serves our community.
Well, the role of the Board of Appeals is really to give people an opportunity to either contest or to defend different types of actions that are within the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals. The main areas that of discussion where the Board of Appeals has original jurisdiction is dealing with variances. It has appellate jurisdiction in dealing with conditional uses and administrative appeals. So the role is really for within that forum in dealing with appeals from an administrative agency, an appeal of a conditional use finding, and a variance is to give people an opportunity to be heard, to give notice of the hearing, to understand the issues, and really to establish a record properly, to determine what the findings of fact are and the conclusions of law are, and to articulate whatever the findings are in that manner, so that there is the ability for the party who might be aggrieved from the decision to be able to appeal it to the next level, which very often is to the circuit court, and then could go to the Court of Special Appeals on appeal. And we're looking at people issues, we're looking at business issues, we're looking at the manner within the law of having the highest and best use of land under those different restrictions. So the Board of Appeals is a large part of what it's designed to do is to provide due process to people and have the opportunity to be heard in a fair, neutral, and consistent manner. It serves the community by helping people to live harmoniously with one another, to realize peaceful enjoyment of their land, to have findings that are consistent with the integrity of the master plan, and that are legal, and and it's subject to Open Meetings Act provisions and the Maryland Public Information Act. The Administrative Procedures Act is generally what governs the procedural activities of the hearing authority, and the Board of Appeals is really a main function is to properly apply the relevant facts to the applicable law in an analytical way, and have a reasoned determination that's fair and neutral, while allowing people the opportunity to be heard, taking into account the expertise of the administrative agency in their decision on an administrative appeal, and to work hopefully together to achieve that which is a positive stakeholder result for everyone in the community. While the decisions of the Board of Appeals can be done by a majority, I think ideally, when the different decision makers on the Board of Appeals are able to all be able to be in a position where they can live with the decision, that's always best to reach a consensus. So those are some of the functions and processes that we look at in terms of the Board of Appeals. Certainly in dealing with the conditional uses, as well as the administrative appeals. I know within 2-112, there's language that talks about what fits within the jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals in hearing those types of cases. And there's also standards that govern variances and different laws that have to apply in order to grant a variance. And so the Board of Appeals would have to look closely at the different factors that permit a variance under the law, and make a reasoned determination based on things like the narrowness or shallowness of the property, the shape of the property, any extraordinary conditions with respect to the property, any existing non-conforming uses, and it's the character of the neighborhood and the historical significance of the property, any environmental issues that relate to the property, and make a decision on a variance that is the minimum necessary to deal with or overcome practical difficulties with that piece of land in a variance. The board would also want to make sure that there's not any substantial impairment with the intent and integrity of the master plan or other law, and really we also would want to look at as a member of the Board of Appeals, is this something that the property owner created and brought on themselves, or is it something that just happened that was beyond their control?
Okay, thank you. Are there any potential conflicts of interest which we should be aware of?
No, I do not believe that there are any conflicts of interest.
And will you be able to make the time commitment required for service on the board?
I absolutely will, yes.
Okay. This ends our formal questions. I see no questions at this point from my colleagues. Still don't, okay. Thank you very much, Richard. We are going to tentatively vote on this next week for April 21st. Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, and all members of the County Council for your attention and opportunity today. So thanks very much.
Thank you. And next,
have a good day.
Do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go back to legislative session number day 13, and we're now on section B, letter B, and that's an introduction for the expedited bill 19-20. The Administration County Executive Office of Labor Relations established. The lead sponsor is the council president at the request of the county executive. The public hearing is scheduled for April 30th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. The next item, item C, is an introduction of Bill 2020, Administration Office of the County Executive, Business Advancement Team established. The lead sponsor is the council president at the request of the county executive. The public hearing is scheduled for April 30th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. The next item, item D, is introduction Bill 2120, Office of Animal Services, established. The lead sponsor is the council president at the request of the county executive, and the public hearing is scheduled for April 30th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. The next item, item E, is an introduction of an expedited Bill 2220, position creation and position alteration of the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Director of Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission. The lead sponsor is the council president at the request of the county executive, and the public hearing is scheduled for April 30th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. The final legislative session for day 13, introduction of bills, is item F, which is an introduction of an expedited bill 23-20, contracts, management and disposal of goods emergency procedures. The lead sponsor is the council president at the request of the county executive. The public hearing / action is scheduled for April 21st, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. Next, the next item that we have, we did have, and it's been deferred for the vote on the expedited bill 1720, the carry out bag tax suspension. That has been deferred until Thursday, tentatively. And next we have, I need a motion for a proposed closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of an appointee, employee, or official over whom it has jurisdiction pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions, Article 3-305, subsection B1I. The topic is interview for hearing examiner. I need a motion. It has been moved by Councilmember Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Jawando. And Madam Clerk, we're going to, I guess we can do that by a hand vote, right, Madam Clerk? So,
Sydney, I have a real quick question. Are we doing the public hearing action on the resolution? for the face coverings, item 6A, sitting as the
No,
board?
that was withdrawn in the beginning. Remember, that was the long discussion for the withdrawal.
45 minutes for not on the
Yeah,
agenda.
yeah, for not doing it, right. Okay, so it's been moved by Councilmember Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Jawando.
Glass houses there, Friedson, glass houses.
What was that? I missed it.
It was the only item I didn't speak to. I just wanted to.
All right, all those in favor, please signify by raising their hand. I'm seeing everybody's hand. It carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are going to close session, and we are adjourned this meeting. Thank you very much.
In Forest Glen Road and University Boulevard. During a live press conference aired on March 25, 2020 at 11 a.m.